He really hated Audie Murphy. Now we know the reason why. James Cagney was born James Francis Cagney Jr. on July 17, 1899 in New York City. He grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Cagney came from a working-class Irish-American family, and life was hard for them from the start. His father worked different jobs, like being a bartender, while his mother took care of 7 children in their small, crowded apartment. When James was young, he learned important lessons about being tough, smart, and wanting to succeed. These lessons shaped who he was as a person and as an actor. He went to Stuyvesant High School and later studied at Columbia College of Columbia University for a little while. But school wasn't what he was meant to do. Instead, he started getting interested in performing almost by chance. At first, he liked art and dance. Then he discovered he loved entertaining people. He started working as a dancer in vaudeville shows, and later he tried acting on stage. Cagney's journey to Hollywood happened slowly but surely. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, when movies were changing from silent films to films with sound, he moved from Broadway to Warner Brothers Studios. What made Cagney special was his amazing energy on screen. When many actors had trouble acting in sound films, he brought a sharp, fast-talking, tough personality that audiences loved. His big break came in The Public Enemy in 1931, where he played Tom Powers, a mean gangster. The film made him a star and created his image as the perfect tough guy. One unforgettable moment was when Cagney smashed a grapefruit into Mae Clarke's face. It became one of the most famous scenes in movie history, showing both his violent characters and his fearless way of acting. But in real life, Cagney was nothing like the gangsters he played. Friends and co-workers often said he was a kind, hard-working, and family-loving man who lived a quiet life when he wasn't filming. During the 1930s and 1940s, Cagney ruled the big screen, not just in gangster roles but also in many different types of characters that showed how talented he was. He could show intensity in films like Angels with Dirty Faces in 1938, where he played a criminal whose death becomes a powerful lesson for young boys. Or he could turn around and play funny, light-hearted roles just as well. His talent reached its highest point in Yankee Doodle Dandy in 1942, where he played entertainer George M. Cohan. This role let him show off his singing and dancing skills, proving that he wasn't just a tough guy, but also a natural entertainer. His performance won him the Academy Award for Best Actor, one of the biggest honors in Hollywood, and it remains one of his most famous achievements. Cagney stopped acting in the early 1960s, but people convinced him to come back for a few films in the 1980s, including Ragtime in 1981, which became his last movie. By then, he had already earned the respect of many generations of actors, directors, and audiences. In 1974, the American Film Institute ranked him as the 8th greatest male screen legend of classic Hollywood cinema, which was a perfect way to recognize everything he did. In 1920, James Cagney's career was just starting out, and he was just another struggling performer in New York trying to make it on stage. That year, he got a job as a chorus member in the musical revue Pitter Patter. Even though this wasn't the kind of role that would make him a star, it turned out to be one of the most important moments of his life, because it was during this show that he met Frances Willard Billy Vernon, a fellow performer. The two quickly formed a deep connection that went beyond the stage lights, finding in each other a sense of friendship, stability, and understanding. They started dating, and on September 28, 1922, James Cagney and Frances Vernon got married. Amazingly, their marriage became one of the longest-lasting marriages in Hollywood history, lasting over 6 decades until Cagney's death in 1986. This was really rare in an industry often filled with scandal and short relationships. Frances, who became known as Billy Cagney, outlived her husband by several years and passed away in 1994, showing the strength and loyalty that had always been part of their relationship. Even though Cagney and his wife didn't have biological children, they chose to grow their family through adoption. In 1940, they welcomed their first child, a son whom they named James Francis Cagney III. Later, they adopted a daughter, Kathleen Casey Cagney. Both children brought new dimensions to Cagney's personal life, giving him a private role as a father to balance against the intense public demands of his film career. Despite his fame, James Cagney always valued privacy and family above the glamour of Hollywood. Unlike many of his fellow actors who loved publicity and wanted constant media attention, Cagney was known as a very private man. He would sometimes allow the press to take photographs, often posing nicely with his wife or children when necessary, but he carefully protected the boundaries of his personal life. Away from the cameras, he preferred a quiet life, going to his farm in New York and later to his estate in Dutchess County, where he could enjoy painting, horseback riding, and nature without being bothered. Sadly, not all parts of Cagney's family life were peaceful. His only son, James Cagney III, died suddenly of a heart attack on January 27, 1984 in Washington, D.C., just 2 years before his father's own death. This was an especially painful loss for the actor, not only because of the death itself, but also because he and his son had become estranged in the years leading up to James III's passing. Their estrangement had begun around 1982, and father and son never made up before his death, leaving a wound in Cagney's personal life that was never healed. The strain in their relationship was very different from the public image of Cagney as a devoted family man, showing the private struggles that even celebrated figures go through. Unfortunately, the tension within the family went beyond his son. Cagney's daughter, Kathleen Casey Cagney, also became estranged from him during the later years of his life. Though details of their disagreements were kept mostly private, which fit with Cagney's lifelong habit of keeping his personal affairs away from public scrutiny. It was known that father and daughter drifted apart during his final years. Despite their estrangement, Kathleen lived on for many years after her father's death, passing away on August 11, 2004. Her death marked the closing of yet another chapter in the Cagney family story, one that showed both the warmth and the difficulties of family life, lived in the shadow of fame. James Cagney, one of Hollywood's most iconic and versatile actors, was known for his electric performances, his unmistakable screen presence, and his ability to bring raw intensity to any role he played. Audiences loved him for classics such as The Public Enemy, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and countless others. But behind the polished image of the legendary star, there was a man who was outspoken, deeply principled, and unafraid of sharing his true feelings about colleagues in the film industry. While Cagney admired many actors, he didn't shy away from openly criticizing others. And one name that came up in his private conversations was that of Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy, on the other hand, had a story that was almost like a myth. A decorated World War II hero, Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor and became America's most decorated soldier before moving into Hollywood. Studio executives quickly realized that Murphy's reputation as a national hero could turn into box office success, and they gave him opportunities in westerns and war films. Audiences respected him, but his acting ability often got mixed reviews. Critics sometimes accused Murphy of being stiff and relying on his war record rather than real talent. Cagney, who took pride in his craft and the art of performance, supposedly grew annoyed by the way Hollywood lifted Murphy up without holding him to the same standards as classically trained or naturally gifted actors. "The man's a hero, no doubt about that," Cagney once said, "but being brave on the battlefield doesn't make you a master of the stage or screen." To Cagney, there was a special boundary between the art of acting and the celebrity culture that tried to blur the lines. He hated the idea of studios propping up a war hero and presenting him as an actor equal to experienced performers who had trained their entire lives. In private, Cagney's words about Murphy were harsher. He was reported to have said, "Audie Murphy could barely deliver a line without it sounding rehearsed. A soldier may win medals, but an actor must win over an audience with truth. And truth isn't in a uniform, it's in the soul." This showed the root of Cagney's frustration. He felt that Murphy's career represented Hollywood's growing reliance on publicity stunts and the exploitation of fame rather than a true dedication to art. It wasn't personal hatred toward Murphy as a man. Cagney, from what everyone said, respected his service to the country, but it was the professional principle that set him off. In fact, Cagney often admitted Murphy's bravery, even going so far as to say, I'll never match what he did in Europe. No one could. But let's not pretend heroism translates to artistry. That's not fair to the craft, and it's not fair to him either. This difference in perspective put Cagney in direct opposition to Hollywood executives who championed Murphy as a marketable star. Studios were often more concerned with profit than artistic integrity. And Cagney felt that promoting Murphy as a leading man cheapened the profession he had worked so hard to elevate. "When you put a man in front of the camera because of his medals instead of his mastery," Cagney once said, "you insult the audience's intelligence." The tension between admiration for Murphy's military heroics and disdain for his acting ability created an unusual contradiction in Cagney's comments. He hated what Murphy's Hollywood career represented, not necessarily the man himself. Still, in a town where public image was everything, those sharp words carried weight. Fans of Murphy saw him as a symbol of American courage, while Cagney represented a more traditional view of cinema as an art form requiring discipline, depth, and emotional honesty. In the end, Cagney's outspoken opinions on Audie Murphy became a reflection of his broader philosophy about Hollywood. He wanted acting to be respected as a serious craft, not reduced to a marketing gimmick. For him, Murphy was the perfect example of that gimmick. And though Cagney himself remained beloved until his death in 1986, he left behind a legacy not only of great films but also of honesty. A man unafraid to say exactly what he thought, even if it meant challenging the popularity of a war hero turned actor. For many, Cagney's words offer a window into the eternal debate in Hollywood. Should fame and image decide success, or should the art itself be the deciding factor? His hatred for Audie Murphy was less about personal hatred and more about defending the purity of acting. Yet the passion in his remarks leaves little doubt. When it came to the world of film, James Cagney had no tolerance for what he saw as imposters. James Cagney's final years were spent in the quiet countryside, far away from the bright lights of Hollywood that had once been such a big part of his life. He passed away on Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1986, at the age of 86 on his beloved Dutchess County farm in Stanfordville, New York. This farm, which he had bought years earlier, was more than just a home. It was his sanctuary. Cagney loved the peacefulness of the rural landscape where he could live surrounded by nature, take care of the land, and enjoy his lifelong love for art, painting, and the simple pleasures of country life. It was on this very property that he took his final breath, dying from a heart attack. The timing of his death happening on Easter Sunday carried symbolic meaning for many, as the holiday is deeply connected to themes of resurrection and eternal life, offering a touching reflection on the passing of a man who had become immortal through his work on screen. His death marked the end of an era. For decades, Cagney had been one of the most iconic and respected actors in American cinema, known for his fiery energy, commanding screen presence, and ability to shift easily between tough gangster roles and lighthearted musicals. Fans across the country mourned the loss of a legend whose career had shaped the golden age of Hollywood. Newspapers printed headlines and tributes, remembering his greatest performances from The Public Enemy to Yankee Doodle Dandy, and recognizing how he had left a permanent mark on film history. For many, the news was especially striking because Cagney had lived such a long and full life, beating the odds of a career that had often been rough and demanding. After his death, a solemn funeral mass was arranged to honor him. The service took place at St. Francis de Sales Roman Catholic Church, located on East 96th Street in Manhattan, a fitting choice given Cagney's lifelong Catholic faith. Though Cagney had always been a private man, avoiding the excesses of Hollywood and the constant gaze of the press, his funeral brought together a remarkable mix of people: family, friends, colleagues from the film industry, and admirers who wanted to pay their final respects. The church, with its quiet dignity, became the gathering place where people celebrated not only his career, but also his integrity, his devotion to his wife Frances, and his generosity to those he cared for. The funeral mass was filled with both solemnity and gratitude. Clergy members emphasized his Irish Catholic heritage and his dedication to values that went beyond fame. Attendees reflected on his remarkable life journey from a boy growing up in the tough neighborhoods of New York City's Lower East Side, to one of the most acclaimed actors of the 20th century. The prayers, hymns, and eulogies carried a sense of reverence, recognizing that Cagney was not just a movie star, but also a husband, father, and philanthropist who had touched lives beyond the silver screen.